So my plan is fairly flexible today. I wanted to sort of give you a little bit of background about, I guess, what it does, what it's kind of, how it differs to some of the other presentation packages, and then I wanted to have a bit of hands-on in terms of, you know, how some features work. And then I've got some, I've prepared earlier type of stuff, which I can show you, just sort of kind of round it off. So that's kind of the loose plan. So why did I get interested, I guess, in this when we have PowerPoint and various other packages? I was at a conference and someone was using that to actually present a research paper. And I thought it was a very interesting way to think about presenting whether it's a class or a research paper. That's not, as Herman said, that's essentially non-linear. So what I find in terms of the classes now is when we have the PowerPoint and bullets flying in and all the rest of it, that works really well. But if you've got an audience that has a lot of the material, it becomes less effective. So holding back information or just sequentially presenting it, I find less and less effective. You know, when you have in the audience, I guess, maybe students that have the material all sort of in front of them. So Prezi kind of works a different way and says, well, okay, it's not based on a sort of sequential reveal through bullet points. What it works on is essentially like a desktop. So essentially you put everything on the table and then you choose through the program which part you focus on. So you guide your discussion around the table, so to speak, around the piece of paper. That's kind of the principle of it. Now, when I first sort of played with the software, probably 2 or so years ago, it was quite fiddly, and it was in parts difficult to construct, but now they've sort of updated the versions quite a bit, so it's becoming more user-friendly. The interface has been updated, and it's getting easier to use. So in terms of when you first look at Prezi, what you're looking at is essentially now a sort of a management center, which I've got here, and it serves a couple of functions. First of all, you can create obviously new Prezis, you can import existing ones, and most importantly, you've got 2 functions here. You have essentially sort of a cloud-based storage, which is what you can see on the right here, or you can work on the computer. Okay, and the advantage of that is that you can work on your desktop, and then you can transport it up to the cloud, and then you can download it again. So what you're seeing here is actually what's called the desktop client. You can also run Prezi purely in a browser mode, so purely as in the browser. So you don't necessarily have to have this on your desktop. I just prefer to operate that way. So when you create a new Prezi, you do get a number of options and templates to help you along the way, but I don't really want to go into that for the moment. So I've just kind of opened one previously, which is essentially blank. So as I said, the principle of it is that you have one large piece of paper that you're working with. And on the right-hand side, you have one of the very useful functions of zooming in and out. So we can zoom in, or we can zoom out. That becomes one of the key features you need to get used to when you're working with the program. So essentially, you're deciding what goes onto the page in total, and then you're deciding which bits go where, okay, in terms of the elements. The other interesting feature of the program is that it's very minimalistically designed. So there's not thousands of options, and a lot of the options are object sensitive. So if you're deciding to draw something, options become available around that drawing. If you have a path, options become available around the path, as we'll see in a minute. So we can start by, for example, drawing a circle. So say, okay, so there's an object. Okay. As I said, we can zoom in and out. So in terms of the bigger paper, the circle is quite small. In terms of the specific circle, we can zoom in and out of that particular object. We can then, anywhere in this circle, we can start clicking away and essentially putting text into the circle. So let's say we want to create Monash Home as a text. As simple as that. So now we have a text object in here. You can edit the text. You get all sorts of bullets and availabilities and all that sort of stuff. Color, so you can change color. And that's what I mean by object-oriented menus. So this becomes available when you're dealing with it. And then we can say, okay, let's draw a couple of boxes around this as well. So another box. And again, this one is one that hasn't got a background. This one does. Again, if you want to give it some text, it's just a matter of deciding where you want to put the text. So text here. Okay, so as we create this now, you can see that as I zoom out, we starting to build essentially what we want to present. And here's another to me, very powerful feature of Prezi, is that it allows the relative importance of objects, which is something very difficult to get working in PowerPoint. In other words, if you want to make a point at certain levels, then this big circle indicates, well, this is a major point, then you have maybe some more minor points. We're talking about this point and that point, we're talking about the same level. So this relativity, spatial relativity, is a very powerful way if you want to go into specific details to do. So that gives you kind of a sense of what's available here. So I'm going to zoom in again and move it around a bit. You have some other objects available here. We can draw an arrow, for example, very simple. We can link that arrow and move it around, change color, etc. Draw another arrow this way. There was something else. Okay, so you have plenty of kind of scope around tools that are available. So very important tools. We can also insert things like images. So, for example, I've got the Vice Chancellor's image here, so there you go. We could put in here. Or we could, if we wanted to zoom in a bit, I could add a video. We have the video here, which is another Monash. Now, some of this will need to go up to the cloud and then come back down because it's converting, so I'm just going to allow that to happen. So it's actually converting. Oops, something's wrong. We won't do that. But you can convert the videos down, and then you can actually have it in the bubble or in parts of the thing, and you can size it so that, and then when you get to it, you click on it, and it just simply plays the video at that point in time. So again, lots of tools available, which I won't all go into in terms of the PDFs, in terms of YouTube videos, even PowerPoint. So if you have existing PowerPoint presentations, you can import some of the pages into this and make it part of the landscape. So once you've decided, okay, this is really the content that I want to talk about, the next most powerful thing then is to say, okay, what are we going to how are we going to guide them through this? Where do you want to start? What do you want them to look at? And the principle around them is what's called frames. So at any one point in time, you can set a frame or an object to be the center of what you're looking at. I'll show that to you in a minute. But before I do, I'm just going to add one more thing here. I'm going to add something called upper side. Yeah, I'll tell you in a minute why I do that. Okay, so in terms of the frames, you can have frames that are visible or that are invisible. I'm going to draw one here which is visible for the moment. So by drawing this frame, I can actually say this is now what I want to look at as a starting point, whatever is in this frame. Okay? So frames become references in terms of the page and what you're focusing on. I can create another frame here. Say around this one here. I zoom in, I can manipulate this frame. So for example, I can turn this upside down. That's why I wrote upside down before. Now it's upside down. You might say, well, why is that interesting? It'll become interesting in a minute. So once I'm in this mode ready to go, I will then say, okay, I'm going to edit path. And so I simply click on items. So that becomes my first path. It's designated with number 1, and it shows up on the left as the first image. So you can actually manipulate those later and change the paths and the sequencings of things. So let's say, okay, that's going to be the first part that I'm going to look at. What's the second part? Well, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to introduce Monash to you, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to talk about it. And then the next thing I'm going to say is, okay, I'm going to actually look more specifically at, say, the Monash umbrella. So that becomes my second image. Notice that it's gone 2 and it's showing me the path that we're going to go through. And let's say, okay, we want to focus next on the Vice Chancellor, and then we want to focus on this upside down, and then we're going to go and talk about this point, and then we're going to talk about that point. Okay, so very simple way to think about, okay, what am I going to do at which part? What does it look like? Okay, so we started, well, we haven't started, sorry. We start with the first frame. Now notice in the moment it's still got these blue lines. You can get rid of those. You can make it invisible frames, so you can make it as big or as small as you want, but I've sort of left it for reference for the moment. So we say, okay, now I'm going to let me tell you a bit of a story about, say, Monash, and I'm going to tell you a story, then I'm going to focus in. So now the story becomes more specific. So I've used the camera to go in and even further in. So you can see that you can sequence what you're doing. Okay, so I'm going to introduce its summary, I'm going to go into more detail. Okay, now we're going to go upside down, because the frame was upside down. So you have flexibility around where you space those frames, how you orientate them. And so you can, so we now have changed it all upside down, and we're going to come back out and go back into the next point. Notice that spatially the viewer can sort of see where you're up to. There's no surprises. It's not like, oh, we've got 15 more slides to go. You know you're in this corner. We haven't talked about these corners. So it becomes almost like a roadmap as you talk through different things. Now, Cameron said to me before that in some conferences you do tend to get seasick because you're flying in and out. So I guess as sort of when PowerPoint came out with its flashing things, there's a tendency to maybe overdo that as well. So I mean, you need to have restraint. So don't fly too much, otherwise it does have that sort of effect. And then we go into this, and then at the moment it stops. So I could say, okay, maybe as a final path, I might just pull the reader back out and say, okay, the final one is going to be back to the beginning. So now, if I present, it's going to come back out. Okay? So again, a very powerful way to kind of say, well, where's the end point, where's the beginning point, what are we doing? Now it does have a feature still, which I discovered last night when I sort of was playing with this. It does actually still have a feature where you can animate individual bubbles. So for example, I could animate this. Let's see if it comes up. It has a little star next to it now. So if you click the star, it's called animation. So within the animation, you can actually, oops. This is what I mean by being a bit fiddly. It's not letting me click on this properly. I might not have enough items, but it actually has a function where you can designate how you bring in certain text within a certain box. You can animate in this version. Any questions? Sorry, I'm just kind of anything specific that. Yeah, I'll do it.
If you were to use these in a lecture context, how would they provide the materials to the students?
Yes, that's a very good question, you can print. So you can make PDF pages out of this. So let me show you what I've done in the classroom, and then we can kind of look at that. So this is a lecture that I gave in first year. Oops. It's actually lecture exercise. So I gave them essentially the whole landscape prior to that. So you can export to PDF, you can export to a kind of like a movie as well, so you can take it with you and just run it without being able to edit it, just as a sort of standalone. So it's quite flexible in that respect. So here is one that I ran, as I said, in first year, and we have these illustrative kind of exercises. So the students had this, they also had a sort of a workbook that went with this that they were meant to kind of have an attempt at. So what I wanted to show you with this as a kind of prepared earlier scenario is that the first thing that you sort of see here is lecture exercise week 10. So it gives you the overview, gives the students the overview that this is what we're dealing with. Unless you have really strong eyesight, you probably won't be able to make out sort of the individual items here. And that's on purpose, right? Because we're not talking about these specific things. But the student, in terms of a learning environment, can see immediately, okay, there are 3 parts to this, and we're going to talk through each part and have a mental reference as to where we're up to. So as I then move through the exercise, the first thing I want to focus on is, again, introduction. So I say, well, let's talk about the introduction here. Again, very small, indicating that these are subparts of the introduction, and at this point you're not really meant to know the particular question, but it puts it in that sort of hierarchy context. Okay, then we go to the question. Very specific, prepare budget and income statement. So that's the task. That's what we're meant to be doing. And then here comes the data. So we're flying to the data within that bubble. Right? And then as we move out, we then go to a more detailed view of task 10.1. So 10.1 becomes the focusing feature of that particular aspect. So I can talk about, okay, let's talk about 10.1. Then we actually talk specifically about this. So that's the solution. That's actually the end product that they're meant to have prepared. So not a reveal at the end, but saying, well, okay, here's actually the end product. So what were we meant to do? Well, this is the task. And then it's a matter of working through each element. So they have that in front of them, and we can talk specifically about the elements. So here I'm using color to draw attention to specific parts of the overall picture that I want to talk about. So again, it's not a reveal, it's talking about it. They have it in front of them, and they can make notes to that. Then we can kind of work our way around the bubble. Okay, so it gives you that sense of, okay, we're dealing with all aspects, and we come back to the final. So we've dealt with each part. And then we'll go over to the next task, and in this case, we're repeating the task, and then we're repeating the process around it. So, I mean, that's just one way to use it. There's so much flexibility in terms of what it allows you, and its effects and its templates, that that's just one particular example. So here I'm moving around, and then I'm moving us all the way back in conclusion to the big picture. So again, relationship-wise. So that's one particular one I thought I'd share with you today. If you go into what's called new presentations, you'll see that people much more creative than me have come up with much more glossy solutions that you can readily tap into. So for example, you know, we can do world map, or we can do flows, and being a sort of an internet community, people put their presentations up for others to share. So again, but the principle is the same. So if we go use this template, then we have a ready-made template, and we can start clicking into various things to add text. So again, a very easy way to do it. Now, am I going for time?
Yeah, you're all right.
All right.
That's good. You're the boss.
Oh. I want to keep people too long. So the other thing I wanted to mention just here is that in terms of what you do with your presentations at the end of the day. So you can, as I said before, you can upload it to your particular space on the server, which you get allocated. So there is offsite storage, which you can then download in remote locations. You can do that private or public, so you can share it with wider audiences, or you can just make it just yourself. So it's sort of I guess Facebook kind of social media way. You can also what can you also do? Just forgot that. We'll edit that bit out. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, just got back to me. You can also do it collaboratively. So there's a new feature which I haven't explored yet, but I saw as being a new feature with their upgrade, and that is that you can have a number of, say, people you invite in sort of a discussion forum, and then my understanding is that either you can present remotely onto their screen, or you can actually collaboratively build on what you're talking with. So in terms of just having sessions where you put your thoughts on the table kind of way and moving things around, so brainstorming kind of ideas. So there's that kind of element as well. Now I'm sure I've only covered a fraction of the capabilities that are within this, and once you start playing with it, as I said, it's object oriented, so you actually don't necessarily know all the functions until you've created that object, clicked on it, and out comes a whole scenario of tools that you can manipulate with. So it's a different way. It has limitations. It's a bit more fiddly to use. Someone said to me a while back that PowerPoint can also do some of these things. It's really just a matter of, how easy is it to do that. It's more constraining, so it gives you less choices around some of these. So you can't have 56 different fonts flashing at you and colors, etc. It's kind of constrained a little bit around what you can use, but I mean, that's just the way they have decided to construct that. Are there any questions?
Is the sequence preset, Axel, or you can run it through the sequence, but if somebody asks a question, what about slide 5? Can you easily go back to?
Yeah, see if I can actually demonstrate that. Let me just go back to this one. So let's say we've started this and we're here, and there's the data, and someone says, oh, what about the data? I forgot this part of the data. So what you can do at any stage is you can zoom back out or zoom back in, or you can move around, and then when you're done, you just click and it continues on. So you can take them out of sequence, absolutely. In terms of design, you can change the sequence anytime. You can actually just let me see if I can see that here. What was it? So if I wanted to change the sequence, I can change the sequence to go back to here. Oops, let me do that here. Maybe there. Now it's going to there rather than there. Or you can move it manually around on the left. So there's a lot of flexibility.
Right. And you can trigger when the next step comes.
Absolutely,
it's not
yeah.
a timeline.
You can, down the bottom you saw when I said present, there's the arrows, so it's fairly standard arrows set up here.
Right.
You also have a function over here which allows you to move it on certain intervals, so if you want to talk and have this sort of play out in the background, it's possible also. Yeah.
Axel, I just had a quick look at the website. Do we need to sign up for the website, or does my manager support it?
That's a good question.
No, it's not supported by Monash. You would need to go in and log in yourself. Now there's a couple of options. Axel's got the full fee paying thing, which means you can download it onto his desktop.
That's the client thing, yeah.
If you use the normal Prezi, then your presentations are publicly available. If you use, but they've just brought in the teacher and student licenses, and there's a free one, and it does allow private presentations. And if you use your Monash email with a .edu at the end, you should be able to access the student and teacher license. So I've got to have a bit of a play with that, but at the moment it isn't a Monash thing. It's but there's even on the public one. I search for Monash, and there's quite a few people here and there are already using Prezi, and those presentations are publicly available. And there's millions of stuff in there. Though why would anybody want to look at your presentation?
Do we want our stuff publicly available?
You would need to make sure your copyright's covered. I suppose there is an IP issue, but I don't even know if your copyright stuff's covered in your slides, it should be okay. But there is like I said, there is a private option with the student and teacher licenses if you use your Monash email address.
And you can package it up so you just take it with you on a USB stick. You don't have to use the cloud. You can just work basically on your computer.
Well, you use it in yours because you're paying for it.
Oh, I see.
You don't have a desktop option if you're.
So we need to look at different options on that. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I think is very innovative also is that people do make their presentations publicly available, so you can actually use elements of theirs. If you think, oh, that's pretty clever the way they've done that, it's a matter of just copying that. So it's a save time. So,
Does this mesh with the Monash Uni lectures online recording system? You know, at the moment how the PowerPoint comes up when you...
It'll still record because
it just takes the screen.
Yeah, it just captures the screen and captures the audio out of the mic, so anything that goes on your screen gets recorded.
Yeah.
As I see it, and thank you for the presentation. It was very, very interesting and a lovely way to give an introduction to it. But for those students who want to see the written material, either before or after the class, that seems to be a problem, doesn't it? Because I think the only way they could see the written material after the class is if they watch the lecture recording. If you're recording.
No. You can, as I said, you can print a PDF of the text.
Yes.
So it turns it into pages. So it becomes a handout, I guess.
Yeah, but it's so small you can't read it.
No, now I have to go back. It's been a while since I did the handout.
Yeah.
But you can designate where you want it, so you can actually have it bigger, and it'll take.
So they can go on.
Yeah, it's not just one page. Yeah, absolutely. You can turn it into sort of sub pages, so that you can say, okay, now we're in this. Now we're on page 4, 5, and 6 covers that. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions there? Oh, thank you very much, Axel. That's
Thank you
something we can
very
have a play with.
Thank you, everybody.